All right. Hey, we're doing a Thursday morning stream. It's been a while since we've streamed. No, I don't think I've ever streamed on Thursday morning, to be honest. But I have I had a young woman reach out to me with some really fascinating questions, and as is often the case, I sat down to respond to her, and then I just thought, you know what, it would really be better just to have a conversation with her. And then I thought, we can have a conversation live on the live stream. So I said, hey, do you feel like jumping into a live stream? We'll do an office hours on a Thursday morning. I had some time, and she said yes. And so here we are. So let me introduce Ramya Mahedran. So, hey, welcome.
Thank you. Thank you for
Yeah.
having me on your live stream. It's a pleasure to meet all of you through this stream. I don't know what's going to come up, but I know the questions I asked, and I really look forward to this conversation. A little bit about what I was trying to reach the professor for was about his speech on radical empathy. And I'm going to stop there. Yeah.
Well, before we go there,
Yeah,
let me
yeah,
just say tell me something about yourself, because I
yes.
know very little now. So that's
Oh,
what's
yeah.
really cool. I get to really meet you here.
Yeah, thank you. So I'm a graduate student from Bentley University. Right now, I work at the Haptosphere Lab. I research on situational awareness. This is my second master's here. I kind of started in computer science engineering, went to an MBA, did a lot of years in consulting, and then said, design actually caught my eyes somewhere in late 2007, right? So, and I said, okay, this is where I think I'm headed to. And by 2010, I was already on the bandwagon and I was studying design, but I felt like always something was missing. And so I kept changing the frameworks that I was studying to kind of look at, okay, what is this missing piece that I'm kind of behind? So I started with service design, then came to design thinking, then went to jobs to be done, and then went to business modeling, and then I went to multiple places, and I said, okay, the missing pieces are actually empathy. Okay, that I got the answer that the good thing was empathy. And then the second part was when I went into systems design, the missing element is expanding that empathy to people who are not like us and to the things that are not humans. And that's where I get stuck because there are great frameworks out there, obviously, but it's not easy to empathize with an inanimate object or a system or an abstract concept. So that is where I am right now at.
And those are the questions that you asked me. And you know what? I've never had this conversation. I haven't directly thought about it. And so for me, I really enjoy thinking out loud, so to speak, and so it would be really cool to explore. So to explore this with you.
Yeah.
Hey, and where are you from?
I come from India, in a place called Chennai. It's in the south. So it's a very hot place. And it's also a very beautiful place. So I moved in like in 2024. I'm here now in Boston. And I just graduated and I'm looking for to take up a role as a UX researcher. So that's where I'm at right now.
You know, Lori and I, my wife and I, have been invited to Chennai over the December break.
Yeah.
And we're planning to go. Like, we really want to go. One of my students and his family lives there, and so we're planning it. So, but it's a long trip. It's a big trip, but yeah, sounds.
Yeah.
Really, I've been to Mumbai
Oh,
and I've
yeah.
been
Yeah.
to New Delhi a few times. So yeah. Hey, so all right. So listen, let's go to empathy. So you found my TED Talk on empathy. And you don't know anything about Social 119, about the class that I teach.
Yeah. No.
Yes. Okay, that's awesome. All right, all right. That's what this live stream is really built around, is that
Right.
class.
Yeah.
It's a 800 student class
Mm-hmm.
on race and culture, ethnicity. It's really
Mm-hmm.
life. It's half about things in the United States and half
Mm-hmm.
about global issues.
Mm-hmm.
And we live stream the class
Oh, I
and we
see.
make videos. And
Okay.
so we make a lot of videos. We have thousands of videos that we've made, but it's really cool that you saw the TED Talk, which is 15, almost 16 years ago that
Oh,
I did
yeah.
that. God, I was much younger then. Geez.
Sorry, I just, I was writing to you on LinkedIn. I'm like, did I get the right person? I don't want to be rude and get
Yeah.
somebody,
I know, I know. I look much older on LinkedIn. That photo. Hey, but okay, so listen. So tell me, this issue is
Mhm.
empathy with non-human life.
Yeah,
Like
yeah.
what brought you there? Like what are some of the
Okay, that's a good question. And it's just that I was doing multi-stakeholder theory, and at that point I was like, who are my stakeholders, right? And I was always interested in non-human personas as stakeholders because we were doing a project for the library, and one of the students were like, a book is a stakeholder, and I was like, I never thought about a book as a stakeholder because it has a lifestyle. It has a lifetime, it stays in your library, it gets retired, it goes back to recycling. So there is a whole life story to a book, but we never considered that when we're designing for a system, right? And I'm not like, okay, that's a book. Now, what about the living non-human personas, which we don't consider, right? Which is like a dog or a cat or a tree. And so we kind of expanded our way of thinking to all these different aspects of the environment. And what got me here.
Hmm.
Yeah, I hope I answered your question.
No, okay, so man, I never okay, so you're doing organizational different aspects of design, including
Yeah,
organizational design. So
yeah,
you're thinking stakeholders, right?
yes.
And I suppose as a sociologist, I'm thinking about populations of people,
Mm-hmm,
okay? Who are the stakeholders and like if we're going to create some kind of um, initiative somewhere
mm-hmm.
about anything, right, involving people, they're the stakeholders. So it makes sense to probably we should be thinking more about non-human stakeholders. Well, no, we should be, right? And okay, so we'll start listing out a few. Do you have a couple examples of that
Oh, yeah,
come
yeah,
to
yeah.
mind?
So let's take all gender restrooms is something that's come to our university, right? It's
Okay.
kind of commonplace here. Now that I've shifted to the US, I see that in many places, a family restroom, all gender restroom. That is not something that you get used to coming from a very conservative, segregated culture where there is always a man and woman. There is no third gender restroom, right? So that is what it started. And I was like, there are a lot of dogs that come to our university, which is allowed when professors get them. I was like, what about them? What about the care for pets? What about the daycare for pets? What happens when the professor is actually teaching a class? Where does the dog stay and stuff like that? These are things that get me thinking about the the psychological safety of not just the humans in that space, but also the animals. And
Yeah.
because
Yeah.
yeah, and especially in public sector design, right? When we are sharing a space with other people, this kind of becomes really important because we guys love dogs. My mom is extremely terrified of dogs. And
Uh-huh.
she's gotten once bitten by a dog, right? So what is easy to us is very traumatic to her. And that's something that got me thinking, oh, uh, there is something here that we are missing on the way we behave and the way we conduct ourselves with things. Because when I went, when I came here, you're not allowed to pet someone else's dog without their permission,
Yeah.
even if the dog wants it. And you feel like, okay, that's kind of some sort of a master slave or some sort of a relationship that they are holding between themselves, and they almost become like a child to the person who is owning it. So you need to know the rules in which you're going to interact with an animal. The same thing happens with
Uh,
plants, right?
well, hang
So
on, stick with the animal for a
yeah,
second.
yeah, yeah.
And now, okay, and so let's stick with dogs. But now we think about empathy, right? So
Yes.
the dog has its own life,
Yeah, yeah,
its own
yeah.
desires, its own world, its own
Mm-hmm.
connectivity. The
Yeah,
dog, an average dog can smell thousands of times better than
yeah,
humans.
yeah,
So it has its own world that it lives in,
yeah,
right? And then it's incumbent, to what degree is it incumbent upon us to
yeah,
actually think about that, to
yeah,
consider that, you
yeah.
know? I was, so we were, my wife and I were just filming a video on our deck,
Mm-hmm.
and the birds, so we have trees that
Oh yeah.
hang over the deck,
Mm-hmm.
and the birds were making so much noise in the video. And at some point they're flying around and doing things. And I thought, wait, hang on a second. This is their world. Like we're in their world.
Yeah, yeah,
And and so then I'm thinking, wait, what are they thinking right now? What do they need? What do they desire? What are their ideas? Like we've invaded their lives, and now here we are imposing ourselves, not imposing, but
yeah,
we're making this video and
yeah,
we're assuming a certain level of quiet, and so it doesn't interfere with all the audio. And I said, wait a minute, hang on, we're in their world. We came
yeah,
to their,
yeah.
so what? So it just shifted my thinking, along this lines. Huh.
Yeah. It's just that, the sense, the decision making, right? So now I can't expect my dog to behave its best at all times. Even the
Yeah.
most well-trained dogs want some time to play. And, it's just, I feel like we impose the same mindset of the
Mm,
adult human, or able-bodied
mm,
adult human into everything else that is around us, right? So it's that lack of empathy when they lack choice, they are not able to communicate, or we don't understand what they're actually communicating, and that kind of
yeah.
causes a barrier between the world. So yeah.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I love that. I remember, so we had a dog for 16 years, and
Mm-hmm.
he was very independent. He was a Portuguese water dog, and he was
Mm-hmm.
very hard-willed, had
Mm-hmm.
his own ideas about the
Mm-hmm.
world. When we went for a walk, we had to let him decide where we were going to walk because he was
Right.
very adamant always. And so we gave him a lot of space to be himself, but we had to continue to remind ourselves, and we failed very often, that he has his own life. And, we're helping him survive, of course, right? So he owes us something.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But he has his own life, his own
Mm-hmm.
desires, his own world. He sees things, he smells things, he's aware of things that we're not. And so we had to constantly be in that space of empathizing with him, so to speak, which is very different than empathizing with somebody else, like with you, for example,
Yeah.
with another human. Hmm. So when you're thinking about design in your work,
Mm-hmm.
then you start thinking about all the non-human entities, like
Yeah.
like a tree, right?
Yeah.
Like plants.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. Yeah.
that it takes you to a very different place.
It is. It's I read a book about from a restaurant owner. I just can't recall the name of the book, but then it's all about him building his whole resort around a tree. He just didn't want to bring down a tree, so he built it around the tree
Uh,
itself, right? So you're making space for nature and kind of making a sacrifice and a compromise, yes, but it's still like you're allowing a coexistence. And that's what I'm
yeah.
trying to aim through design, right? As you said, in the case of our pets, there is a power dynamic and there is a disparity. Like we own them. They have to listen to us. And sometimes they don't. And anybody who's grown a cat can tell otherwise that cats don't listen to what you
Yeah.
say as
Yeah,
much
yeah,
as
yeah.
dogs would. So that kind of got me. But the very idea, right? The second part of the question, which I didn't write to you, is that the same people who have a dog would advocate vociferously for meat eating because they don't see the both animals as the same animal. But when they see somebody who's eating a dog, they really don't like that person because it's their pet, right? So this world in which you see there is a different shift towards animals itself and how we treat different animals. And that was like,
Yeah.
oh, that
Well,
got
yeah. So like, for example, that we will eat a goat,
mhm.
right? But
Yeah,
not a
yeah,
dog. And what's the difference between a goat and a dog, right? I mean, they're different, but
yeah, yeah,
it's how different,
yeah.
like, and why is it so okay for one and not for another?
Mm-hmm.
A pig and a dog. Hey,
Mm-hmm.
are you Hindu?
I am, yes.
I mean, you grew up as a Hindu, right?
Yes, yes.
So how does that shape the way you think about other life forms? How does growing up in Hindu culture shape that?
Yeah, that's a great question. Thank you for asking. It's just I used to be a meat eater, right? Growing up, I gave that up about when I turned a teenager. I gave up that lifestyle. But like most Indians, I'm a lacto vegan. So we consume milk, but we don't eat meat or eggs. So that is the kind of lifestyle I am at right now. Now
Wait, you
to
call it a lifestyle, all
It's
right?
called a lifestyle. Yeah.
Yeah,
Because
no, it really is.
I had to
Yeah,
explain my lifestyle time and again because a lot of
yeah,
friends, especially I had friends from Turkey. I was learning the language. I made a bunch of friends. And that country, they eat a lot of beef. Hmm.
yeah.
Now they look at me and the first question that I ask is, "Hey, are you from a cow praying country?" And I
Yeah.
have to say, "Oh yes,
Yeah.
we do pray cows, but then we don't technically pray cows. It's just that it happens to be a vehicle of one of the gods, and that's great." And it's also then I had to explain a lot. Then I had to do a lot of design research to be able to answer that question in a better way, right? Because at best we are an agrarian society. We depend a lot on our cows and our oxen to get the work done. So we had a really symbiotic relationship going on with cows. So we don't generally
Mhm.
eat them, but we do eat them once you retire. When they become a dry cow, when they become old, you tend to eat those meats. It's not like unknown or unseen in the culture. So then we said,
Yeah.
like, okay, there is a nicer way to explain this to people in a way they would understand and not just think that, okay, this is a cow praying country. And that, yeah, so it does shape the way you think and the way you behave. But I feel like as I spoke to many vegans from around the world, or vegetarians or half vegetarians, they kind of get the idea in the general sense with or without
Mhm.
religion involved. So that actually boiled down back to empathy is to understand, okay, we can't eat meat all the time because that is not sustainable. So all these kind of small things that come into your vocabulary as you pick vegetarianism, and then you make justifications to your, how you're going to behave and justify that culture. So yeah.
Mm-hmm. I think like you know, uh, for me, it just shifts the focus a little bit when we ask ourselves, okay, let me just have some empathy. Let's go back to the question, right?
Hmm.
Let's just put myself in the shoes. Right now, I'm looking out my window and I see
Hmm.
a tree. I have a couple different bushes,
Hmm.
and now I'm familiar with these life forms, right?
Hmm.
Because I see them every day, so I'm
Yeah.
connected to them.
Yep.
And sometimes when we're in a drought, I go out and I water plants, and I feel like, listen, it's as though they're asking me to give them nourishment.
Hmm.
And it just changes the way I live in my body. It's not a radical change. It's very subtle, right?
Hmm.
Uh, so So, you can go really, okay, now let me ask you this. You can go really far in applying empathy to other non-human life forms, right?
Mm-hmm.
Being empathic. Like, how do you, how do you like draw, how do you imagine drawing the limits, you know?
Yeah, so one of the things that I had to come to a compromise is that the very act of living is of some form of destruction, right? So we do consume resources as a living person. So we, in the form of making ourselves, we do destroy plants. I'm a vegetarian. I definitely do eat
Yeah.
vegetables every day. So it is going to be how I am going to go about it in the most maybe ethical, painless way possible. Like for instance, when I was younger, we grew a lot of flowering plant, and my mom used to make us, hey, don't pluck the flowers vigorously. Make it gentle so it doesn't hurt the plant. And also she had more reasoning to it that if you pluck it, you know, the the base would go away and it'll not flower again. So that was the idea behind it. So to be more gentle towards the plant itself. So that kind of taught us, okay, so we are going to be humans. We are going to eat things. We are going to destroy things. And I'm going to fly from one country to another. All this is a given, but I want to make that as ethical as possible, at least to my conscious choices, right? There are going to be unknowns, obviously, all the time that I make a
Mm,
choice that I'm going to keep destroying. But it's also, I come to realize making that choices is also a privilege. So whenever I'm
yeah, that's cool.
making, yeah,
Yeah.
I say I want to eat organic vegetables from today on, right? But organic vegetables cost more than a non-organic vegetable would do, right? And not all, if I could all organic produce, the production rate comes down. I'm not able to feed the people in the population. So if we read a macroeconomic view, then it tells me we cannot achieve 100% empathy. That means we cannot live the life that we aim to live the way we live it today. Maybe that means reeling back a little bit of our lifestyle, a little bit of compromises from everybody and not just a few people. Yeah.
Mm. You know, I love what you're saying, by the way. The story of just plucking the flowers carefully.
Hmm.
Um, it doesn't it doesn't harm us to be to have this awareness. I have the idea that people who are thinking about these things, most people who are thinking about these things have a doorway into a gentility, right? To being
Hmm.
more gentle
Hmm.
and being more aware in the moment of what's happening. And that just strikes me. Maybe it's because that's my natural orientation is to
Hmm.
be like that, but it's just straight. That's just, it's a way of being in the world to which I am more attracted. I will
Mm.
just say that. Like it
Mm.
doesn't hurt to just be gentle toward the trees and the plants and just to have an awareness of that and other life
Hmm.
forms. Um, yeah, it's kind of it it I don't know, it just feels better, that's all. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
this reminds me of a debate. A bunch of meat-eating friends and we got into it, and somebody made a comment that God made everything else in this world to serve us, to feed us, to be resourceful to us. And that's just a very grand assumption that the entire ecosystem exists so we humans
Yeah.
can thrive, right? So that got me like, that's pretty much not true. So there are moral, but that kind of touched a lot of moral boundaries. Like people like, I don't smoke, I
Yeah.
don't drink, I don't eat meat, I don't eat red meat, I don't eat eggs, I don't drink milk. And so there are ways in which we justify our own lifestyle choices, maybe to be
Yeah.
okay with that in our head. Um,
Well, we have to be, right?
mhm,
And yeah, I don't impose
Yeah.
And I don't hear from you, like you don't have this sense of, you're not imposing saying everyone should be empathetic toward non-human
Mm-hmm.
beings, but but you just happen to be. And I am quite empathetic actually toward
Mm-hmm.
non-human entities,
Mm-hmm.
right? Like when I pull weeds, like I'm aware that, yeah, I want to get this weed. I have a garden. My
Yeah.
wife has
Yeah.
gardens, and there are weeds in it, and I don't want to pull the weeds out. But the weeds, that's a life form of sorts. So I recognize that, and I don't
Mm-hmm.
pretend that that's not happening. But
Mm-hmm.
I don't know, it just feels more sacred to me, I guess.
Yeah.
And I grew up in a Western idea about God and about the universe is human centered. There is a singular
Mm-hmm.
God in this
Mm-hmm.
Western world, and that God created the world in that God's image and put human beings in that God's image and said,
Mm-hmm.
listen, you humans, you're here to have dominion over the rest of the world. You dominate the world. I mean, that's an ideology, it's a belief
Yeah.
system.
Yeah. Yeah.
It doesn't make sense to me at
Mm-hmm.
all. It never did.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't today. But if other people believe that, obviously,
Yeah. Yeah.
billions
Yeah.
and billions of people, and that's okay, but it doesn't
Mm-hmm.
make sense to me. And for you, as someone who's Hindu, and you have, what, thousands or
Oh
millions of
yeah.
gods, really.
Yeah. Yeah,
So,
yeah. That's also another fascinating space of trying to, so this idea of living with a pantheon of gods rather, right? So it just expands
yeah.
your capability to accept that they are flawed and they could be angry or greedy or make mistakes, fall and then raise again. So this idea that kind of pours back into humanity that we live in and says, okay, you can also make mistakes, but you have to learn from it and then grow back up. So
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah, yeah, yeah,
Mm,
yeah. No, I
but
think
sorry, go ahead. Yeah, yeah.
one of the things one of the reasons I teach my class in the way that I do is just to introduce people to new ideas.
Mm-hmm.
And so one idea would simply be this, like, what if why not? Because I'm working with young people who are
Mm-hmm.
mostly between the ages of 18 and 22, 23.
Mm-hmm.
So that's a time when we're very mostly people are generally speaking, most people are more open to
Mm-hmm.
different ideas. And when we're still living inside of our parents' home in our first 18 or 20 years, and in some cultures, I mean, much longer than that, but we're taking on ideas from the world around us. But at some point in time, we grow, and
Yeah.
then we have to say, okay, let me entertain my own thoughts and what do I think? And for me, it's not a very big step
Mm.
to walk into this world that you're thinking about, and which is to say, listen, everything has energy, everything is an entity, everything has some level of consciousness. At
Mm.
some point, like, why wouldn't we extend empathy out to all these other life forms? uh, and it's just a question. You don't have to do it. I
Yeah,
don't
yeah,
tell
yeah.
people you should do that, but I go back to this issue of, like, everyone would think it was morally reprehensible to eat a dog or a house cat,
Mm.
but it's okay to eat all these other beings that are incredibly smart, just as smart as dogs or cats. Like, and just that contradiction right there, for me, to not even entertain that contradiction, to just do
Mm-hmm.
it because our culture, we've always done that in the culture. Well, this is
Mm.
what we've done in my family, so it's what I do. Well,
Mm.
at some point in time, we grow up and you
Yeah,
have to have your own ideas. So what do
yeah.
you think? So I love that. I love that you're
Thank
pushing
you.
pushing the boundaries and
Yeah.
bringing, yeah. So your work as so you're studying design.
Mm.
It's like, man, when you open the design world up to
Mm-hmm.
everything, it's unlimited, right?
Yeah, yeah, it's kind of liberating because at some point I was also looking at technology nowadays, we have technology has voices, it has a persona, it has avatars, and I realize how much I depend on my Alexa to take care of my daily reminders and stuff like that, right? So I realized that, and then it's like I talk to Alexa like I would talk to a pet, a smaller,
Yeah.
younger, you
Yeah.
know,
Yeah.
assistant or a pet, and I realized, okay, we are existing in a time when we're treating technology like humans and we expect it to
Yeah.
behave as intelligent as us, and so it gets angry and you're like, that's not what I asked you. That's not what I
Right.
said. And so you're making a tiny argument right there, and then you realize, oh, that's just a machine and it's just not supposed to get everything that you just said, right? So and that's the space we are at. And I realized, okay, this world needs a little bit more understanding into non-human personas, because every day we're getting integrated more and more with synthetic, personas. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh man, that's really cool. Yeah, what's the difference, right? This tree, this bush outside of my window
Hmm.
here, what's the difference between that? I mean, okay, let me just
Yeah,
the
yeah.
bush outside my window and ChatGPT, or I have created my person that I communicate with on
Mhm.
ChatGPT, the person, the entity, not a
Mhm.
person, and I gave it a human name,
Yeah,
but this
yeah.
entity, right? But what's the like? And I treat it, this entity, as there's this level of consciousness that I
Mm-hmm.
give to it without even knowing. Like, for example, when I'm asking it questions,
Mm-hmm.
like you said, sometimes I'll get frustrated, or
Yeah, yeah.
sometimes it's finishing up. It's like, okay, well, I'm here. If there's anything you ever need from me, you know where to find me. And I always have to wait till it gets to the end of the sentence before I turn it off. I don't want to be rude.
Yeah, 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 yeah.
Yeah. And then I stop and I'm like, oh, dude, don't, that's not real. Right.
Yeah.
But at what point does it become real? Right.
Mm-hmm. So the lines keep blurring at this point, and we need to have some sort of a one is that we socialize less and less. That becomes a really bad idea for humans. But it's also that we are increasingly relying on technology. And
Yeah.
so if a bunch of my friends chose not to have children, they rather have pets, right? So they are uh, double income households with a pet. And now the way they treat their pets is not something the way even some people would treat their own children, right? They have insurance, they have grooming, they have schools. And so we are like, from a perspective of a very underdeveloped or powerish country, you would see that as very vain or privileged act. But to them, it is not so. So then I realized
Yeah.
that it's like a two-way empathy on seeing their reality and saying, okay, accepting their reality and saying, that's okay. You replaced your child with a pet. You're happy with
Yeah.
the choice and you should be able to do that. And that gives you, it's your choice and you're able to afford it. Go ahead. But the
Yeah.
conversation, it's so that I'm a pet owner. I don't have children myself. So when we are talking, they're talking about their kids and I'm talking about my pet. And it's the same thing sometimes. And they're like, oh, I had to take him on a walk. I had to take him to the park. And it's kind of the similar conversation, right? So then I said, okay, let's come down and talk about the similarities rather than, thinking how different our lifestyles are. Because I can't leave my pet
Yeah.
at home to go to another vacation. Same thing goes for parents sometimes. And I was like, okay.
Oh, that's cool. Yeah, that's very cool. Hey, let me ask you a question
Yeah.
completely on
Yeah.
this
Yeah.
topic, but
Yeah.
off
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
topic that we
Yeah.
were
Yeah.
talking about. Why do you think that there's so many people your age
Hmm.
and above, or around your age, the younger people, right, who are deciding not to have kids right now in these decades? What do you see? What's going on?
Hmm. I just feel that as we became more nuclear by nature, our families, right? Because it's no simple task when they said that it takes a village to grow a child, and that's true. Then that's going to be true now, and it's going to be true later on. So it does take a lot of people to just bring a
Mm,
child to the world and make them have access to all the knowledge. And a single person playing the role of all that right now is going to be super hard. So
mm,
back in my times, we had grandparents coming and taking care of us while our parents worked or they went about their jobs. And my mom didn't bother us that much, actually. She would come, she would ask us, okay, have you done your homework? Okay. Once we said we have done that, it's like, okay, go out and play. And she's not going to bother us till 9 p.m., right?
yeah,
She gave us that
yeah.
autonomy to grow and to play physically. But right now, kids are cooped up. They're studying all the time or on the TV or the video controller. And then you're like, there is no space for autonomy or growth or agency or whatever you would call it, right? So this exploration, this imagination, everything is dwindling down. And
Mm,
I simply don't have bandwidth to support a thing that cannot make its decision on its own. Like,
yeah,
but
yeah. Whereas
yeah,
with a pet,
yeah,
where it's just easier because there's
you,
also kind of a
yeah.
terminal lifestyle, like
Oh, yeah.
a terminal. I mean, when we got our dog, we knew, okay, if he lives, he's going to live on average between
Mm-hmm.
12 and 14 years.
Yeah.
It's like, okay, so we're not, this isn't for the rest of our lives.
Oh, yeah, yeah, yeah.
And and many people get then they would get another dog and another, but for us it was just this period of time. Yeah, it's funny. Lori and I yesterday we were talking about someone we know who has a child who's they're the both of the couple, both of them are working full time and they have a
Mm,
child. And
mm,
Lori said, "Oh my God, how do you like?" And there's no grandparents anywhere at
yeah,
all nearby. It's like, how do you do that, man?
yeah.
The stress of that is,
Yeah.
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 Hey, I have a question. Going back to empathy.
Yes.
Um, yeah, so what I will say, I have a lot of empathy for people who have children or
Mm-hmm.
even a single child without grandparents
Oh,
around.
yeah, 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 yeah. Yeah, yeah,
Oh
yeah,
man, it's so
yeah.
hard. Hey, how much empathy, uh, when do you when do you think about too much empathy? Like, how often do you get to the place where you can't accommodate or you just can't think about empathizing? It's too far, you
Yeah.
know?
Yeah. Yeah, that's a great question. That's when I really like that word compassion coming in. So compassion does help experts
Yeah.
in a level that um in empathy, we kind of level play field it. So we think that the other person has the same level of agency that we do.
Yeah.
But when I go to a doctor, I don't feel that the doctor would be empathetic towards my condition as much as compassionate towards my condition, maybe. Because he's
Yeah.
dealing with hundreds of patients in a day. They've seen a
Okay.
pattern and they need to tell us what to do. So they're directing us and telling us more prescriptive, but at the same time also listening a little bit about our problems, right? So
Hmm.
it's there is a little bit of empathy, but it shifts to a level of compassion, to expertise. Hey, I know
Hmm.
what I'm saying because I've done the work, I've done the research, and the research says that this is going to work. But we can try this if you're willing, and that kind of shifts the conversation between an expert and a novice or somebody who doesn't know about it, and
Yeah.
that is a big hindrance to empathy because people think that it's a soft skill. It's going to be exhausting when I'm going to show being empathetic all the time and I become a giver all the time and everybody around me is just going to be taking, then I'm going to be just giving and lose out on. I'll be the good guy who loses out in the end, right? So, and I feel that empathy cannot be unidirectional at this in any interaction, at least.
Mm.
It should be bidirectional. Yeah.
Yeah, I hear that.
Yeah.
Hey, someone in the chat is asking about
Yeah.
you're touching on this, but
Yeah.
it's like by asking, well, you're not asking people to empathize at all. You're just talking about your own experience. So same with me. I'm really not asking. I'm giving people an opportunity to empathize, but I'm not telling them they should. It's just
Yeah.
like, whatever, do what you want to do, but I'm going to give you this
Yeah.
opportunity here because I want the opportunity. But
Yeah.
when is it too soft for people, right? When is empathy, it's like it's too much. At some point in time, you just have to make a decision and
Yeah.
it's like, come on, stop, right? I don't know. Do you think about that?
Oh yes, so
Or
I
how do you
think
think
it
about that?
keeps me up a lot, to say the least. So it's just so when I say so you were I think in your TED speech itself that kind of comes in. Have you thought about this person is also a father who just walked out and promised his child a future, right? I could empathize with a criminal, but that criminal is a criminal in my eyes,
Yeah,
not a criminal in his head. And this is that situation. We drove them to kind of make that, right? So if you feel that most of the time people are behaving badly because the system is designed or setting them up for a failure or to behave in such a way, that means we need a systems level change than blaming one person for doing something wrong. And kind of feels that's why I said empathy is kind of going to be more universal by nature. And if just one person is expecting to be good, they are going to lose out. So I don't do take out coffee. So
yeah.
when I'm not tempted to go to a Starbucks or a Dunkin' and take out a coffee. If I
Uh,
do, I would like to take it in my own cup, right? So now that somebody may ask, one straw and one takeout cup doesn't make a big difference in the whole scheme of things.
yeah,
But if 7 billion people are going to say the same thing, then it does really make a difference in the climate change, right? So
yeah,
now I can expand my network and influence to talk to people and say, try to take your own cup, try not to
yeah,
have coffee. And so that kind of indulges or shift the whole game to say, hey, there is much more to making coffee at home than just drinking coffee from the outside. Have you ever discovered the art of making coffee? Do you know
yeah,
a French
yeah.
press? And you kind of bring people in and say, kind of influential change in a positive way. So I feel that instead of just harping on empathy, we should go to the root causes of what is causing that system to fall at this point and maybe address
Mm.
that through design. And that's the power, is what I feel.
Ah, okay, okay. That's a key, right? Because one of the things that happens is when people feel like they're being told what to do, they're feeling judged. Because
Mm,
if I tell someone what to do, like, hey, you should you should think about making your own coffee at home. Well,
mm,
basically, why am I saying that? Because I think it's better to make coffee at home. Therefore,
mm,
I'm judging people who don't make
mm,
coffee at home.
mm,
And like, okay, yep, I'm saying, hey, if you, Ramna, you make coffee at home, that's a bad thing. So therefore you're a bad person, right? So like, oh,
mm.
okay. And people react to that
Yeah.
in a way because it is a judgment, which is one of
Mm,
the reasons I'm so careful about just doing my class without judgment. Hey, we're just going to do this. We're going to talk about these things. You do anything you want with it.
yeah.
But you in this world of so you experienced that also, right? But you now just gave a really cool idea. It's like, well, what if we design the world where
Mm-hmm.
you just will make uh you're not being told what to do. It's like we're giving you the opportunity
Mm-hmm.
to do that. And it just feels better all around, let's say. I don't
Mm-hmm.
know. Like here's an example. Um, in Japan, they have trash and recycling bins. Well, it's hard. The trash bins are very small, but the recycling bins, you have recycling for plastic, for one kind of plastic, and then another kind of plastic, and then for paper, and then for cardboard, and then for
Mm-hmm.
aluminum, and then like you might have seven bins for recycling, and then a small one for trash.
Yeah.
Okay. In Korea, there's no trash bins in the public anywhere. Like if I have this, this, I'm writing with my pen and it stops working, I I have to put it in my I can throw it on the ground, okay, but nobody does that. I have to take it home with me to find the trash bin. It's going to be very difficult for me to find a trash can in public.
Right.
And basically, they've designed the world so people don't litter because you take it home. Like, if I eat I have a bag of potato chips, like a little bag, and I eat all the chips and I fold the bag up, I put it in my pocket and take it home and throw it away. And that's a design, that's a conscious design thing. So it's interesting that you designed for behavior.
And kind of inducing that. So we all know that empathy is hard to practice. So the answer would be that instead of calling it empathy, what if I just opened up this idea of being more tolerant and acceptable? And when I say that, right, it just needs a little bit of exposure training, is what I feel. I am open to that. When my sister and I are allies ourselves to the LGBT community. So it's super hard to convince an older generation to understand what LGBTQ is, why we are allies, and why we think it's. So at one point, we realized that hate is actually not doing anybody any good. And I am not going to change my orientation, so I don't expect someone else to change their orientation either.
Yeah.
So I might actually just accept it and then see how we can coexist in a space and have a friendship, a relationship beyond having all these labels that tag people, right? We were able to make a lot of strides. We did. In fact, now we are freely able to talk with that topic with our parents and without judgment. So we are able to bring our friends who are in the LGBT community home and say, hey, this is my friend. He or she has a boyfriend or a girlfriend. They're like, okay, they get it to extent they are accepting of it, even if they're not loving and, kind toward that idea. So I feel that you could bring a change with persistent efforts and through good conversations.
Yeah. I think it's, and I agree with that. I like that approach, and it feels better. Like I don't. First off, I'm at the age now where I realize that most people are very slow to change their behavior about anything or their thinking, so it really is. I spent, in my early years, I spent a lot of time wasting time trying to convince people to do something that they didn't want to do. Right. And I'm like, those were my ideas. Like, it's not their ideas. So now I've really been able to just kind of not do that. I don't have time for that. Right? Just be who I am and let it happen.
Yeah, maybe inspire. I think you already inspire.
Inspire. And sometimes what happens is people are inspired to change how they think in ways that it's not what I would do. If someone asked me, like, well, would you like students to, do you think it would be better if they thought like this or like this or like this? I might say, well, I don't know. It's probably best if they change it to think this way. It's probably second best if it's like this, and third best if it's like this. But then they go this way, and I have to say, okay, well, that's all right. That's what it is. Yeah. That, and I guess so. Someone asks, Noy Levy 3340 just said, what about empathy toward a group who doesn't give it back to you? And I think, well, yeah, that's kind of also at my age, you learn over time, all the time when I'm empathizing, but I don't get it back. And that's just kind of how life is, you know.
Yeah,
Um,
I mean, I was a Polish brat growing up. My dad served about 35 years of his life. So if you think about the life of a police officer as a life of empathy towards the people you're actually servicing,
mm,
they may not understand it. They think that you have the infinite power and capacity to solve every problem. And you know that for sure,
yeah.
that you are also human and you don't have everything under your control. There are times when you have to let people down and say it's not possible, make them understand why it's not possible, because they're assuming that it's possible, that's it in your hands, and that you're not helping me. It's like us turning to God and saying, hey, you can do this for me. And then it's like, God is not doing anything for you. And then you're like getting angry on God. And I feel that that's kind of something that happens to humans too. So when I reached out to you, I expected you to have all the answers. Now, I'm just saying,
Yeah.
you just do that automatically because you think that somebody who's lived longer than you and who has so much more
Yeah.
experience than you would know this world upside down. And you're like, that's not true. Maybe it's
Yeah.
something that you just get into a discussion with and then understand and then learn for yourself a little bit. And then, okay, he gave me a great framework to think this through. He asked the right questions. Maybe that's his expertise, and that's what we needed. That maybe he didn't
Yeah.
have to answer my questions directly,
Yeah,
so
yeah.
right. So
Yeah. You know, the funny thing is you go in the beginning of your life, you're seeking answers. And
hmm
then you got that mid time when you think, okay, I think I have some answers. And
hmm
then you get to the end, if you've been living a really good life, a thoughtful life, you
yeah.
get to the end years of life and you realize you really don't have the answers.
Yeah, yeah,
That's
yeah.
that's where I'm at now. Like I really don't. I don't have any idea about anything. Yeah. So that's why it's good to talk to people like you. Yeah.
Yeah, it
Yeah.
genuinely is it's very opening to talk to different kind of people because their walk of life. And that's something that I've come to realize in empathy, right? In a world that I have no understanding of, no exposure to, uh, I may lack a lot of empathy towards them because I have not grown up like them. I wasn't treated like them. And that happened to me. I was bullied at school, but I was very, very well kept at home. So my parents are very supportive. My sister is very supportive. So I have never known a world that lacked confidence, that could break you down to a point that you couldn't get up, right? But there are people like that out there. And I couldn't empathize with them. I would always think that you can fight back, you can get up, you can make it.
Yeah. Yeah.
And they would be like, no, you're talking from a high place and you're talking from privilege. And I realized
Yeah.
that sometimes it's a privilege to be able to make our own choices. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
It's a it's a huge privilege. Yeah.
hmm
Last night my my wife and we were coming home from an appointment and I said, man, I just that we're driving in a car and
mm
I just said, God, I don't know what to do with the privilege that I
mm
feel so
mm
often. And that privilege, like we in the United States, you've been here long
Yeah, yeah,
enough,
yeah.
right? We have a certain way in which we talk about privilege, but I didn't,
hmm
I just meant just like, wow, just that I'm healthy, I'm able to move my body from here to there, and
Mm,
man, I'm able to think, I'm able to do perspective taking, which is what this whole
mm,
conversation is really
mhm,
about. It's
mhm,
perspective taking, you
mhm.
know. And we started out talking about dogs and
Uh-huh.
animals, and then we went all over. But it really is about perspective taking. And it's cool for you. Like, for you, when you came to the United States, was that the first time that you were here? Like when did you come for the first time?
2024. Yeah.
Yeah. Had you lived in another country before?
I visited but never lived.
Wow.
Yeah.
So that's big. That's huge.
Yeah.
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 That's hmm. Well,
The
it
idea,
feels
yeah, sorry, please finish.
no, go ahead.
No, I was just going to ask you a question about privilege.
Okay,
It's
no, go
yeah,
ahead. Go
yeah.
ahead.
It's just that sometimes this privilege is inherited. Like just because we are born a certain way
Yeah.
in a certain
Yeah.
place, and sometimes it's also earned through the years, right? So mm, if you take any typical middle class living is all about striving to get that privilege. But you possibly maybe one of money, one of position, or one of power. And once you reach that, what do you do back? So everybody who's reached a certain position, I would ask them, how will you help the next person to make it here
Yeah.
much easier? And the
Yeah.
answer usually
Well,
is, yeah.
no, go ahead. Go ahead.
No, no,
Please. Yeah.
no. Some of the answers I've gotten is it's hard, it's luck, or it's fate. And and everybody who's come, who has that no rags to riches story, usually say that they're very hardworking or they're very, very incredibly lucky. But there is no framework to
Yeah.
tell people that you could attain a privilege that doesn't come naturally to you.
Yeah. Yeah. I think so. Here's the way I think about it.
Mm,
Um, you try not to feel any sense of obligation because obligation just destroys
right.
goodwill. Okay. So if I have an opportunity available to me,
Mm,
and I have had opportunities,
yeah.
my wife and I were just making a video and having this conversation about both of us growing up middle class, I mean working
Mm,
class,
mm,
and just kind of what that has meant, right? So the first is, yeah, we don't feel an obligation, okay, and and you're from Chennai, right?
mm,
So this is like you uh, yeah, just as a way to, I'm going to respond to Toad Strangler, 1963. Nah, it's when I walk into a conversation about something like this with the word privilege, I do it from a very different perspective. Not the same.
mm,
Like in their culture right now, there's this
yeah.
ongoing conversation. It's the
Yeah.
same damn thing that people
Yeah.
say over and over and over
Yeah.
again, and then people respond to it in the same way. And it's like, no, 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 just set that aside. Let's just hold this word as its own unique word. It's just the way you're
Mm,
asking it,
mm,
right?
mm,
So the first is to say, well, the mere fact that I'm able to walk on, I have two legs and I can walk on them, or that I'm can breathe naturally without a respirator or God knows what. I mean, there's so many layers
yeah.
of privilege, and there's so many layers of privilege that I don't have, you know. And I think the first thing that I do is I don't feel any kind of obligation toward anything at all. Um, the things that happen to me, they happen either by chance or they happen because I did something, or that's okay. So there's no obligation at all.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then I don't think about giving back. I don't think about the next person. I don't worry about that because the next person is the next person, right? Everyone's starting from square one. Everybody, it doesn't matter where they are, they're starting. And the squares that we start from are different for everybody, so it doesn't matter. Some people, back home in South India, there are people with absolutely nothing at all, right? The
Mhm.
Dalits or something, And so, okay. Um, but then I just say, okay, let me live my life with an awareness, like, which
Mm.
is the whole conversation that we're having, like
Oh, yeah.
empathy toward all sentient beings or non-sentient beings that are still alive. And let me just have an awareness because it feels good for me,
Oh, yeah.
to treat the plants and animals and the trees and so on. It's like, okay, treat them with respect,
Yeah.
because they're all creatures. We're all creatures of the gods.
Mm,
And then whatever happens, happens. And I'm naturally inclined, I'm going to find ways to be kind toward others and opportunities for kindness, because kindness feels better than the opposite. The opportunities for kindness will come to me, and
mm,
then I can act on them. And like,
right.
okay, that's good. And then I don't have to think about it. I don't have to
Mm.
plan it. I just know that it will happen.
Yeah.
And like, okay, that's good. I like it.
Yeah.
So that's what I do
Yeah.
with that. That's how I think about that word, uh, privileged. It means something different for every single person,
Oh,
you know.
yes. Yeah, I guess so. Yeah. Because the story you just told me reminds me of that star thrower, the story where somebody's throwing starfishes back into the sea, and somebody's like, hey, there are thousands of fishes, and you're not going to get to all of them. And the person goes like, it matters to the one I just threw. So, I feel like you may not be, yeah, go ahead. Sorry, you had a point to make.
No, no, and so no, I love that. That's a great story, right? There's a thousands of starfish on the millions on the
Yeah.
beach, and they
Yeah.
sing them back. But as long as the person doesn't feel obligated to put the starfish back in the ocean, and this is for me, right?
Yeah.
When I
Yeah.
start to feel obligated, it's I lose that authenticity.
Yeah.
And if I start to think that other people should do something similar, I lose the authenticity. And
Yeah.
so for me, I just want to just be the person that I'm inclined to be. Just follow my natural
Mm.
the natural
Oh, yeah.
orientation
Yeah.
of my consciousness.
But
And
it
then that's
just,
okay.
it was hitting. So, I mean, at an individual level, what you just said gets me a lot of peace. But what happened when we were doing multi-stakeholder theory is that when we take something like CSR, because
Mm.
I created a company and because I am using natural resources to serve somebody, I am obligated to be corporately socially responsible, to do right by the planet, to do right by the society, to do right by my employees, and so on, right? So with that ability to make profit also comes the responsibility that I need to make it right. And
Okay,
that,
well, here.
yeah,
Okay, but here, let me say this. No, you're not obligated,
yeah.
but you've decided, you've made the decision that you are
Mm,
obligated,
mm,
and that decision feels right for you. It aligns with your consciousness. And that's perfect.
mm,
Like that's great. Um, but it's a decision, and maybe you haven't consciously made the decision, but the
gotcha.
decision emerges out of your unique spirit.
Mm,
And okay, that's awesome. If it aligns, then it's perfect. But there's no rule in the universe. The gods have not decided, like, hey,
yeah, yeah,
uh, Ramya has to do this. And
yeah.
so it's very helpful for
Mm,
you to just see that it's something that you're drawn toward, you're oriented toward, and it
right.
just feels right.
Is that,
That's
oh,
very
sorry.
helpful.
Yeah. Is that something that changes when you live in a system and there are social norms? For instance, let's say giving 10% back to God or in the service of people, and everybody agrees to that framework and they are, okay, let's give back to and then they
No,
start doing it.
no, it's something that emerges when you realize that people don't all agree. There's nothing to which people will all agree.
Yeah.
Everybody will have their different ideas about how to live the best life for them.
Mm,
And you give people as much opportunity to follow the path that they feel they should be following. Okay.
mm,
That's the libertarian ideology side. and that if everyone is allowed to follow that path, most people will have an inclination to be kind toward others, to not harm others.
Mm,
Really, that's how life is. Most people, most of the time, the vast majority of people,
mm,
most of the time.
mm,
Yeah, so it doesn't, yeah, you just follow. And then what that does is that also helps us to not uh, insist that other people see the world in the way that we see it.
mm.
And when you get to my age, you'll realize how valuable that is, because you will not have spent a lifetime trying to change the world and failed. You know, you get to the end and you fail.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
that's the key. And that's where I can have a conversation about something like privilege
Mm,
and see it in this very complex, holistic way to make it a really fascinating conversation as opposed to the same old, very narrow, very uninteresting conversation,
mm.
as it happens throughout the United States culture. You know, it's very boring,
I have kind
which
of
is why somebody like Toad Strangler responded in the way that they did. It's like, you know,
yeah. So does that change? So for instance, if you went to my grandmother, she would insist that we didn't waste food growing up. So she's like, finish the food. And if we said it's not tasting good, we don't like it, she would then point us to the underprivileged, and she would say, there are a
yeah,
lot of people in this world who don't have food on their plates right now. And you guys should be more than grateful that you have food on your plates, and you should learn to respect it, right? And it kind of, it's something that you grow up with. So you're told to look upon the people
yeah,
beneath you and to empathize and to say, okay, I am grateful for what I have on my plate. But I could do the opposite. I could look upward and say, that person is having more than what I do. They have choices. They get to have pocket money, but I don't get to have
yeah,
all of that, right? So I can do both ways and compare
yeah.
myself. So,
Well, I think that's it's a good story because basically, first off, your grandmother probably made the food. And when you say like it doesn't, I don't like it, it's like your grandmother's, she's probably an amazing cook, right? South Indian grandmother. It's
yeah.
like, come on, man, are you kidding me? Like, so that's the first thing. But secondly, it's a story that we use to connect human beings to one another. Um, you know, I don't like to use those kinds of stories to shame or guilt people into doing
Mm,
something, but you know, we are all connected,
mm,
and it is food, and the food was life, whether it's plant-based or animal-based. And it's
yeah.
like, hey, look, we brought this together, and so it's really important um, to see that we're connected
Mm,
here. Like, don't waste, you know. And then that's a story itself also, but for me, it tends to be a story that I appreciate. I don't like it doesn't feel good for me to waste, but you know, sometimes I do, but it doesn't feel good. I don't like it. And I don't know why, but it
mm,
doesn't feel good. So
mm.
I try not to. Yeah.
It's just that, when we are talking to someone more experienced, who had more living experience than we do, they draw a comparison between their lives and ours, and they would have
Yeah.
have gone through a famine or gone through World War II, but we haven't. We just born into a freedom in a country which has freedom, which has democracy, and we feel that every other person would have experienced the same thing I have. Now, I would carry that privilege and maybe scold the next generation. Hey, do you understand what it means to grow up like,
Mm,
right? So I don't know
mm,
which is right. But it's nicer to learn that there were times when my mom and my grandmom didn't have grains on their table. And that
yeah.
also humbled us to say, okay, that we have come a long way. And we don't have family,
Yeah.
right? And yeah, and so on. Yeah.
No, I think there is something humbling about it. Uh, I don't know. If there is a God, if there are gods, I like to I like to have the idea that it's good to try to be respectful to all the things that are part of the God. But then, God's very wasteful too, right? If there is a God, hurricanes and typhoons and earthquakes and floods and tsunamis, these are these are very wasteful.
Mm,
They just destroy so many things. So the gods are also wasteful,
mm.
right? So,
You say that.
yeah.
Yeah.
Drought, the drought, heat, extreme cold, it kills many, many things, these things. And so
Yeah.
the
I mean,
gods
it
are very
funnily
wasteful.
reminds me of my culture. Sorry, I didn't mean to jump. But just what you said. So, one of the things that we grew up listening to is that when the leader of a country is not good, that's when you have all these natural disasters coming your way. Okay, I don't mean that in
Oh,
that way.
yeah.
So it's said that way. And then you realize, okay, what prompts them to say that? And you would go
Yeah.
back and say, and there are multiple idioms that come from a culture that says that even if there's one good person in this, place, you would see good rain. Okay, even if it says one good person in that village, you would see rain. And it's like, okay, that all that together is like, so you're saying that I can influence nature by being good,
Yeah.
and that kind of ideology kind of blends you to think about what you do today will come back to you tomorrow. And that's where we have a lot of discussions on karma and so on,
Um,
culture.
yeah.
Yeah.
Well, those are the stories that we use to keep people in line, you know. Society doesn't work when everyone's
Yeah.
doing their own
Yeah.
thing. We need people to
Mhm.
follow and follow the rest of us. So so we need that. So we come up with moral tales
Yeah.
like that are good. It's mostly it works. Everybody drive, don't speed on the roads.
Yeah.
In the US, we drive on the right side of the road. They
Mhm.
do follow the rules. It's just
Right.
better
Yeah.
for all of us if you follow the rules. So, um, yeah, that's a great story. All right,
Just
listen,
harmony. Yeah.
it's harmony.
Yeah.
Harmony is key, right? It's very much this sort of East Asian, Confucian, Buddhist
Mm,
perspective. It's
mm,
every perspective, right?
mm,
But in Confucianism and Buddhism, harmony is at the core of everything. And I really appreciate that. Uh, in the West and in Hinduism,
mm,
but in the Abrahamic traditions
mm,
and Judaism, Christianity, Islam, harmony is not at the core of
mm,
it, but it is in the East, and I appreciate that.
mm.
Yeah.
I would say
Okay. Well,
harmony.
listen.
I would say harmony with God versus harmony with other humans.
Yeah. Exactly. Yeah. It's harmony with
Not
God.
to say that
Yeah.
Eastern religions aren't also trying to become one with God, but it just the intense uh, social implications of what they do, yeah, was for God more than each other. It seems
Yeah.
in
Yeah.
some ways.
I wouldn't. I wonder about What about Hinduism? You can't have harmony with gods because the gods are all fighting each other, right?
And the funniest part, that's what I said, right? So with so much freedom to pray what you like, whatever you like, when
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
like, you're still fighting between
You.
yourselves, and that's such a shame, right? So it's just I felt that people don't like people with different than them, with ideologies, with perspectives different than them, right? So,
Well, I would say that I wouldn't. I don't think that's true. I think most people are mostly tolerant of people who think different than them.
mhm,
Sometimes we don't like it, but
yeah,
sometimes we just struggle. Like, it's just not so easy, but
yeah.
yeah.
No, it's just in Hinduism. So from the perspective, when
Oh, right.
yeah,
Okay.
so
Okay.
it's
I
just
got you.
that,
Right.
so in ancient times, at least hundreds of years ago, people didn't move much. So for a village, you had a god, and everybody in that village either prayed that god, right? So you had a lot of harmony in who you prayed, and most of those gods were related to your natural flora and fauna, and most that was like nature worship. So if you take that ideology, so for instance, my mom used to pray for a river. First of all, we don't live near the river anytime now. But that river goddess is invoked to give good water and no flooding through the year, just as an example.
Uh,
So when you did that, you were telling, hey, Mother Nature, you bring me water, but not floods. Bring me enough water for my crops, right? So in the end, you're doing a
yeah.
prayer towards that. So when you do such a thing, what you are actually asking God is that you wanted a peaceful life and harmony and good harvest, and that's it. So that was a life where you didn't have so much differences. But right now, we've come to a place where you have a lot of choices and also a lot of confusion, and anybody can follow anything, and suddenly it doesn't sit
Uh,
well with everybody. It's like,
yeah.
yeah.
Okay. And in Hinduism, there's sort of like a cosmic order,
Mm,
right? Like it's a connection in all creation. So you have these gods at the many different layers and
mm,
levels, right?
mhm.
So it's yeah, it's like so harmony is, if I think about that, it's like so Hindus are trying to create that kind of inner peace,
Yeah.
and it's like you influence the larger cosmic order. Yeah. Huh.
Yeah, I feel there's a lot of interaction between the indigenous way of praying and Indian way of,
Yeah.
it's more naturally bound, and that's where it gives you a way to include. So as I said, many of our gods actually have animals as their vehicles. So you naturally
Yeah.
pray that particular animal too, and it kind of becomes something that you serve food to, keep protected. For instance, there's one of these months where people don't eat meat. And that is
Yeah.
meant to be
Yeah.
religious, right? So we gave up meat for an entire month. And that kind of coincides with the mating season of the animals. So it was designed in a
Yeah.
time where you just
Yeah.
wanted the animal population to grow and not to hinder the harvest later on. And it kind of got adapted through the religious ways, and people think that it's for God, but actually it was not meant for God.
Yeah, that's cool. You know, that's kind of interesting when you think about it. I mean, usually in any sort of religious or moral system
Mm-hmm.
that's been developing over a long period of time, there's these mandates get
Mm-hmm.
traced back to something, right? Like, not eating meat during the
Yeah,
mating season,
yeah.
like, okay, that completely makes sense, right?
Mm-hmm.
Usually I mean, we see this, right? So yeah, it's so interesting, that life is not haphazard, as we say. Life is very interconnected.
Mm.
Yeah, I love that. Hey, listen, we've been talking for
I
an
know.
hour and a half. Yeah, it's a long
Yeah.
time. Yeah,
I'm
very
like,
cool.
hopefully everybody got the answers they wanted.
Yeah, yeah, I got the answers I wanted. More confusion. I always like these conversations because I like starting and sort of
Oh yeah,
traveling
yeah,
around, and like
yeah.
we end up back where we start usually. But hey, so listen, Ramya, it's really
Yeah,
nice to meet you.
yes.
Thanks for reaching out to me.
Thank you.
And yeah, yeah, it's really nice. I really appreciate it. I
Absolutely.
love the way you think, and I love, like, that you're really wrestling with the kinds of, just a range of questions that are very
Hmm.
thoughtful and
Hmm.
interesting. Yeah.
Thank you so much. Yes, and thank you so much for taking time to talk with me today. I know,
Yeah.
I mean, I know you said that the TED Talk was 16 years old. I'm like, I just, filtered empathy, and I saw every topic on TED that spoke about empathy, because I was writing about it and I didn't want to say something that was not already said, or I wanted to bring light to what was already said by thought leaders such as yourself. And that's like, okay, radical empathy, what is that? And that's how I got to you. And I
Oh,
really
yeah,
like that
that's
provocative questions you were asking, right? So as you said, it was all about perspective taking. And if I were
yeah,
them, I would justify my actions and so on. So
yeah.
I
It's
didn't know.
pretty,
Yeah.
yeah, it's pretty profound, actually. Yeah. It means, you know, you really have to, it doesn't mean like you said, it doesn't mean that you excuse it, right? But you know, like, I want to be as smart as I can. I want to be as thoughtful as I can. So it means, okay, well, I need to understand, you know,
Yeah.
I want to understand. So, um, yeah, it just makes my life more interesting. So, yeah.
Yes. Thank you so
All
much.
right.
Yes.
Yeah. No. Thank you. Hey, thanks for tuning in. And Noy Levy, 3340, you're welcome. And Axel, you were late coming on, but it's whatever. We had a good conversation. All right, listen, everybody. Thanks. Our fellow Ecuadorian. I eat kui, by the way, so I saw that you don't, but I do. Yeah, thanks, everyone. All right. Okay, Ramya, thank you. I
Bye.
appreciate it.
Take care.
Okay, goodbye. Take care.